Today, we're going to step into the world of one of the most complex and honestly, one of the most misunderstood conditions in mental health, borderline personality disorder. We're going to peel back that clinical label and try to understand the raw human storm that's often raging just beneath the surface. And that, right there, really gets to the heart of it. For someone with BPD, emotions aren't just feelings. They are these torrential waves, unbelievably powerful and overwhelming, that can pull them under in an instant. And that's not just a metaphor. For so many, it is their daily reality. So, okay, what is BPD from a clinical standpoint? Well, the official definition really points to one core theme: instability. We're not talking about just being a little moody. This is a deep, pervasive pattern that touches every single corner of a person's life: how they see themselves, how they feel from one moment to the next, and how they connect with other people. To really get this condition, we have to look past the behaviors that we see on the outside and start with the internal experience. What does it actually feel like to live inside this emotional storm? It pretty much all starts with this foundational terror, the fear of abandonment. And I don't just mean a major breakup. The panic can be triggered by something as small as a text message that takes too long to arrive, or a slight perceived change in someone's tone of voice. This fear becomes so all-consuming that a person might do literally anything to avoid being left alone, even when the threat isn't even real. Now imagine not having a stable core. One day you feel like you're this brilliant artist, and the next you're a complete and utter failure. Your values, your goals, your entire identity can feel like it's just shifting sand beneath your feet. It's this profound identity disturbance, like you're constantly looking in a broken mirror, just struggling to figure out who you really are. And that shifting identity, it leads to this. Many people with BPD describe a chronic, painful feeling of being hollow inside. It's not just boredom or sadness, it's a profound void, a lack of meaning that they might desperately try to fill with impulsive actions. And here it is. This is the hallmark of BPD, what experts call emotional dysregulation. Moods don't just shift, they ricochet. A person can go from feeling okay to intense rage to deep, crushing despair, and then back again, all within a few hours or sometimes even just a few minutes. These are not normal mood swings. They are emotional tsunamis, and they're incredibly difficult to regulate or even predict. So, with all of that internal chaos brewing, how does it actually show up on the outside? Let's take a look at how this inner storm leads to the kinds of observable external behaviors you might see. Well, that internal storm eventually crashes onto the shores of reality, and it can look like relationships that burn incredibly bright and then just burn out completely. It can look like impulsive acts, reckless spending, substance abuse, unsafe sex, all these desperate attempts to feel something or maybe to stop feeling so much. It can also lead to self-harm or suicidal gestures, and even moments of dissociation, where the world itself just doesn't feel real anymore. Now this is one of the most confusing and painful dynamics for people in relationships with someone with BPD. It's a defense mechanism called splitting. One minute, you are their savior. You're the most perfect person in the entire world. But the second you disappoint them, even in some tiny way, you can suddenly become the villain, all bad, cruel, and worthless. For them, in that moment, there is just no middle ground. A level of instability this intense doesn't just appear out of thin air. So the next logical question has to be, where does it all come from? What are the roots of all this chaos? The answer, as you've probably guessed, is pretty complex. It's not one single thing. It's really this intricate mix of biology and biography, of nature and nurture. Yeah, so research points to BPD developing from this complex interplay of three main areas. You have neurobiological factors, differences in the brain's actual wiring. You have genetic factors, a predisposition that can be passed down. And then, crucially, you have environmental factors, the life experiences that shape a person's world. It's really the collision of these three things that can create the storm. Okay, let's talk a little brain science. Studies show that in people with BPD, the parts of the brain that act as the emotional control center, like the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, they can be different. So think of the amygdala as the brain's emotional gas pedal, and the prefrontal cortex as the brake. In BPD, it's like the gas pedal is overactive and stuck to the floor, and the brake is just less effective. And that's where this combination becomes so crucial. A person might inherit a genetic vulnerability for high emotional sensitivity, but then if they grow up in an environment where their intense feelings are constantly dismissed, ignored, or even punished, Or worse, in an environment with serious trauma, abuse, or neglect, that genetic vulnerability can get switched on, leading to the development of BPD. Understanding all the mechanics is one thing, but knowing how to actually interact with someone who's going through this, that's something else entirely. How can you connect with someone when their reality is so turbulent? This final section is all about trying to build that bridge. This is maybe the most important thing to take away from this entire explainer. Those intense external behaviors we see, the anger, the frantic pleas, they are so often misinterpreted as being manipulative. But if we look at them through the lens of everything we just talked about, we can see them differently, as desperate, even if dysfunctional, attempts to cope with an internal world that feels completely unbearable. So what can you actually do? First, validate their feelings. You don't have to agree with the reason for the feeling, but you have to acknowledge that the emotion is 100% real for them. Second, set firm, consistent boundaries. This is to protect your well-being and theirs. Third, try to remain a calm, stable presence in the storm. And finally, gently encourage them to seek professional help from therapists who really specialize in this disorder. Here's a perfect example of what that looks like in the real world. Saying, "You're overreacting again," is like telling someone who's drowning that the water isn't really that deep. It's just invalidating, and it will almost always escalate the situation. But saying something like, "I can see how upsetting that is for you," offers an anchor. It tells them they're being seen and heard, and that can be profoundly de-escalating. And please remember this. This is absolutely critical. Supporting someone with BPD requires an immense amount of patience and emotional energy. You just cannot pour from an empty cup. It is essential, not selfish, but essential, to prioritize your own mental health, to seek your own support, and to protect your own well-being. Ultimately, that's the real challenge, isn't it? We may never fully know what it's like to live inside that storm, but maybe perfect understanding isn't the only goal. Maybe the bridge is built not with perfect understanding, but with validation, with boundaries, and with simple compassion. And that's what we should probably leave with today. The actions might feel destructive, but the intent behind them is so often just survival. It's about surviving a tidal wave of emotion that most of us, thankfully, will never, ever have to experience.